All right, hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. This time, we're going to be jumping headfirst into the world of Ethereum smart contracts.
Oh, yes.
And I know maybe some of you out there are thinking, smart contracts sounds complicated, but trust me, it's not as intimidating as it sounds.
Not at all.
In fact, you can think of a smart contract kind of like a vending machine, but way cooler.
Okay.
Instead of just snacks, though, right? It's handling agreements and transactions and making sure everyone plays by the rules.
Yeah, think of it like a vending machine, but with like a built-in lawyer.
Exactly. It's like a digital enforcer.
Right.
And for this deep dive, we've been digging into this awesome guide all about testing these Ethereum smart contracts.
Yeah, a really good one.
But here's the thing. Even if you're not a programmer, understanding why this testing is so important is crucial.
Absolutely.
Because these contracts, once they're live on the blockchain, they're permanent.
Like set in stone.
No takebacks, no edits, no do-overs, and that means any mistake, even a tiny one, can have huge consequences.
Especially when you're talking about lots of money, which is often the case with these contracts.
Oh, absolutely. And we're going to get into some real-world examples later on, like, remember that whole DAO hack thing?
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
Millions of dollars gone because of a vulnerability in the code.
Chilling stuff, right?
Definitely a cautionary tale.
But before we get too deep into the scary stuff, let's take a step back, right? Yeah, make sure we're all on the same page. So for those who might be new to all this, what exactly IOS a smart contract?
Okay, so imagine you're trying to raise money for a project, right? Instead of using a regular platform, you could create a smart contract that automatically collects those contributions.
Oh, interesting.
And it only releases the money once you hit your fundraising goal.
No middleman involved or anything?
Nope, everything's handled by the code, totally transparent and automated.
So it's basically like a self-enforcing digital agreement.
Precisely. That's the power of smart contracts. But even with something as simple as crowdfunding, if the code's not perfect, things can go south real quick. I can see that, yeah. Like, what if the code accidentally locks up the funds? Or even worse, what if someone figures out a way to drain those funds before the project even gets off the ground?
Exactly. And those are just a couple of the things that thorough testing is designed to catch and prevent.
Okay. So, we've established that testing is important, but why is it especially crucial in the world of smart contracts?
Three main reasons: irreversibility, high stakes, and security risks.
All right, let's break those down. We already touched on irreversibility. Once that contract's deployed, it's there forever, no going back.
Right, like launching a rocket. You don't hit the launch button unless you're absolutely certain everything is working perfectly.
No room for error. And what about the high stakes part?
Well, we're not just talking about small amounts of money here.
Right.
Smart contracts are being used for some seriously big financial transactions. Token sales, decentralized finance platforms, you name it.
So millions, even billions of dollars potentially at stake.
Sometimes, yeah. That's why even a tiny error in the code can have massive financial consequences.
Yeah, makes sense. And that brings us to that third point, security risks. And honestly, for me, the story of the DAO hack is what really drove home just how crucial security is in this space.
Oh, yeah. The DAO hack. It was a major turning point for sure.
It's like a cautionary tale for the entire blockchain community, isn't it? Can you give us a quick rundown of what happened?
Well, the DAO, right, it was this super ambitious project back in 2016, like a decentralized venture capital fund run entirely by code.
Wow.
People were so excited about the potential, they invested millions of dollars worth of Ether into it.
And then what happened?
Well, a hacker, they found a vulnerability in the code and managed to drain a huge chunk of that money.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it. What kind of vulnerability was it?
It's called a reentrancy attack. Imagine going to an ATM to withdraw money. Now, a reentrancy attack would be like tricking the ATM into letting you withdraw the same amount over and over before it can update your balance.
So basically, the hacker exploited a loophole in the code to keep taking money before the system could catch on.
Exactly. It exposed a major flaw and really highlighted the need for rigorous testing and auditing of smart contracts.
Okay, I'm starting to see why testing is so critical in this space. But how do we actually go about testing these contracts? It's not like we can just run them through a spell checker.
Oh, no, not quite. It's a much more complex process. Think of it like building a car. You wouldn't just assemble all the parts and hope it drives.
Of course not. You'd want to test each part individually.
Exactly. And then you'd test how all those parts work together as a whole. Same idea with a smart contract.
So how does that apply to testing a smart contract?
Well, that's where different types of testing come into play. There's unit testing, where we test individual functions or modules of the contract, like making sure each part of the car works on its own.
Okay, so that's like testing the engine, the brakes, the steering wheel, all separately?
Precisely. But then we need to test how all those different parts work together.
Right, because a car is more than just the sum of its parts.
Exactly. And that's where integration testing comes in. It's like taking the car for a test drive to see if everything interacts correctly. Does the engine actually power the wheels? Do the brakes actually stop the car?
So unit testing checks the individual parts, integration testing checks how they work together. But a car also needs to be safe, right? Is there a way to test for security vulnerabilities in a smart contract? Like, to make sure it can withstand a crash?
Absolutely. And that's where security testing comes in. It's like in our car analogy, subjecting the car to rigorous crash tests and finding any weak points that could compromise its safety.
So with security testing, we're essentially trying to break the smart contract, seeing how it holds up against those potential attacks, right?
Exactly. Got to think like a hacker, trying to exploit any vulnerabilities before someone with bad intentions does.
Makes sense. So we've got unit testing, integration testing, and security testing. Is that everything?
Well, those are the core types, yeah. But there's one more that's really important. Performance testing.
Performance testing. Okay. What's that all about?
It's all about making sure the smart contract can handle a heavy workload. You know, like making sure it doesn't slow down or crash when things get busy.
So like making sure it can handle the blockchain equivalent of rush hour traffic.
Exactly. And of course, depending on what the contract's for, how complex it is, there might be even more specialized types of testing needed.
Gotcha. So it's a pretty involved process for sure. But let's maybe get into a specific example to see how this all works in practice, yeah. Our source uses a decentralized escrow contract as an example. So picture this. A smart contract that's holding funds until both the buyer and the seller confirm that a transaction's been completed successfully.
Okay, yeah.
What are some things that could go wrong there, and how would we even begin to test for them?
That's a great example, yeah. Even a contract that seems pretty straightforward like that, there can still be pitfalls.
Right.
And the first step in testing is always to think about all the possible scenarios, not just the ideal situation.
Right, because let's be real, things don't always go according to plan, right? So let's start with that ideal scenario, what do they call it, the happy path. What would that look like for this escrow contract?
Okay, so the happy path would be, buyer places the order, seller ships the goods, buyer confirms they got them, seller confirms delivery, and then the funds are released to the seller. Nice and smooth.
Smooth sailing. But what if something goes off the rails? Like what if the buyer gets the goods but just forgets to confirm delivery? Or
Okay.
what if the seller, tries to say they shipped the goods when they actually didn't?
Those are perfect examples of what we call edge cases, situations that, yeah, they deviate from that normal flow, but they're still possible.
They could happen.
Exactly. So we got to test how the contract handles those situations.
Okay.
Does it have mechanisms to handle disputes? Can it do refunds or go to arbitration if needed?
So we're trying to anticipate any potential hiccups and make sure the contract can roll with the punches.
Exactly. But we also need to think about straight up malicious actions too.
Oh, right. Yeah. People trying to game the system.
What if the buyer tries to take the funds out without confirming they got what they ordered? Or the seller tries to claim a delivery that never happened?
Okay, now we're getting into some shady stuff. How do you even test for those kinds of things?
You got to think like an attacker.
Oh, okay.
You simulate those malicious actions in a controlled environment, see if the contract holds up.
Makes sense.
Does it have safeguards in place to prevent, unauthorized withdrawals or fake claims? Can it identify and penalize those bad actors?
So it's kind of like a constant game of cat and mouse, trying to stay one step ahead of the bad guys.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And it really shows why the security testing is so crucial in the world of smart contracts. You got to anticipate those threats and build those defenses right into the code itself.
So we've talked about different types of testing. Unit testing, integration testing, security testing, all super important. But when you're dealing with, really high-value contracts or really complex ones, it seems like you'd want to go even further, right?
Or absolutely. You're talking about those next level steps, the extra layers of security.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
Think of it this way. You wouldn't launch a brand new spaceship without multiple checks and balances, right? Rigorous testing, sure. But you'd also want independent experts to just scrutinize every single aspect of the design, the construction, everything.
So like getting a second opinion, but for code?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the smart contract world, those second opinions, they come in the form of security audits and formal verification.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Let's break those down. What exactly is a security audit?
Imagine like a team of elite code detectives going through every single line of your smart contract, searching for any hidden vulnerabilities, any backdoors, anything suspicious. That's basically a security audit.
So these auditors, they're like, what, cybersecurity specialists, but specifically for smart contracts.
Exactly. They have that deep expertise in blockchain security, and they use, a mix of manual code review and automated tools to try and break your contract.
Wow.
It's like a stress test for your code security.
Makes sense. It's like having an independent team double check your work, make sure you haven't missed anything crucial.
And that's so important because even the most experienced developers, they can make mistakes. A fresh pair of eyes, especially ones trained to spot those vulnerabilities, can make a world of difference.
And having that security audit probably gives you a lot more confidence when you're dealing with a high-stakes contract, right?
Oh, for sure. It's like an investment in peace of mind, knowing that your contract has been thoroughly vetted by the experts.
Okay, so security audits, those are like having expert detectives examine your code. What about this formal verification you mentioned? What makes that different?
Formal verification, that takes things to a whole other level. It's using mathematical models to rigorously prove that your contract does exactly what it's supposed to do, under any and all conditions. It's like having a mathematical guarantee of correctness.
Whoa, okay. That sounds intense. So, like, you're using math to prove that your code is bug-free.
Essentially, yeah.
Cool.
It's a very specialized field, but it's becoming more and more important for those mission-critical applications, where even the tiniest error could be catastrophic.
So it's like the gold standard of security for smart contracts.
You could say that, yeah. Formal verification, it just provides a level of certainty that those traditional testing methods just can't match.
This has been really eye-opening. We've covered so much ground, different types of testing, security audits, formal verification. It's clear that making sure those smart contracts are secure and reliable, it takes a multi-layered approach for sure.
Definitely. It's like building a house.
Yeah.
You wouldn't just focus on the foundation or the roof. You got to make sure every element is structurally sound and that they all work together perfectly.
I love that analogy. So as we start wrapping up this part of our deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What are the golden rules of smart contract testing?
I'd say the most important rule is to be thorough. Don't just test for the happy path. Try to break your contract. Think of those potential edge cases, those malicious actions, and use those test coverage tools. Make sure you're testing every single line of code and make testing an ongoing process, not just a one-time thing. Every time you make changes, test, test, test.
So it's like a constant cycle of building, testing, refining, and then testing again.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to ask for help. There's a whole community of smart contract developers out there. They're happy to share their knowledge and experience.
Collaboration is key, especially in a field as complex and as fast-moving as blockchain.
Yeah.
So as we head into the final part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about. If you were developing a smart contract, what's the one feature you'd be most worried about testing? Like, what aspect of your contract would keep you up at night, worrying about it?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About all the things that could go wrong.
Yeah, it's like, what's the weakest link? Where are the potential pitfalls?
Exactly. Because you're not just thinking about that one feature in isolation.
Right.
You got to think about how it interacts with everything else, how the whole system behaves.
And how it could be exploited, right?
Oh, absolutely. Thinking about those edge cases, the unexpected inputs, even malicious attacks.
So it's not enough to just, check if the code works in a perfect scenario.
And nope, got to stress test it, try to break it, think like an attacker.
Because out in the real world, things rarely go perfectly according to plan.
That's for sure. And with smart contracts, those mistakes can be costly.
So testing is all about minimizing those risks, building confidence in your creation.
Absolutely. Knowing that you've done everything you can to make it secure, to make it reliable.
And knowing that you've learned from the best, right?
Right.
Tapping into that collective wisdom of the developer community.
Yeah, because we're all in this together, right? Trying to build a better future with this technology.
And that's what's so exciting about it. The potential is huge.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Got to make sure we're building things the right way, testing thoroughly, thinking about all the angles.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the fascinating and sometimes a little bit scary world of smart contract testing.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have, from those basic types of testing all the way to those high-level security audits and formal verification. It's been a journey.
It has.
But hey, that's what these deep dives are all about, right? Exploring these complex topics, learning from the experts, and hopefully coming away with a deeper understanding of how this technology works and why it matters. So, to all our listeners out there, whether you're just starting to dip your toes into the blockchain world or you're already a seasoned pro, we hope you found this deep dive informative and engaging. And if you're thinking about building your own smart contract, remember, testing is your superpower. Don't skimp on it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, deep divers, stay curious and keep on exploring.